Alright, I got something to say. This has been a long time in the making, and I've been bottling up these feelings, these opinions for quite a while. Watching what's going on the internet having to do with demonolatry, if you want to call it that, and summoning demons, invoking demons, evoking demons, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to straighten some of this stuff out right now. I was triggered tonight. My autism was triggered by a video called Demon Azazel Brings Forth Dark Sexual Empowerment by some woman who calls herself the Serpent's Key. She's right up there with E.A. Coetting, Jeremy Crow, and that whole lot of fucking losers who are out to gain attention for themselves or make a buck. And they don't give a damn whether they present useful information to anybody or whether they get anybody messed up and giving them bad instructions, bad data. So anyway, this broad basically takes a page right out of E.A. Coetting's modus operandi and dresses up the name of Azazel with all sorts of, how do I put this? Ear candy? Stuff that makes it appetizing? Stuff that basically, like, turns Azazel and turns demonolatry into something like a horror movie with all its glorification of terror and fear and horror. It's talking about filling your chakras with dark energy, and it's just a bunch of shit, okay? It's a big load of bullshit. What can I tell you about Azazel that is true, since I'm telling you that mostly everything that these people say is not true? Okay, what is true is what the Hebrews accused him of. And you know I'm not a fan of Hebrews. But what they accused Azazel of, in terms of making weapons of war, teaching men arts and sciences, teaching them about cosmetics and makeup, music, magic, stuff like that, that's true. That's why they hold a grudge against him. That's why they are wrathful toward him, because it's the whole theme with Adam and Eve in the garden and gaining knowledge and putting on clothes and ceasing to live an animalistic existence and actually taking up the bridle of living a human lifestyle. Azazel basically did the same thing, except he got a little bit more practical with what he was teaching people. He's done the same thing with every group of people or every individual he's encountered. Every time he's been called upon, summoned, invoked, evoked, whatever, he's done the same thing. Is he's brought empowerment and enlightenment through very pragmatic and practical means. Lucifer is a little bit more on the philosophical side. Lucifer introduces you to high philosophies and helps you to unravel them and understand how they relate to the world. It helps you to unravel some of the mind control that you've been put under by society and by religions. That's what these entities do. That's what they do. End of story. And that might not sound very interesting to you, but I'm going to tell you right now, it's extremely interesting what you can learn from Azazel, from Lucifer, and from these so-called demons. You can learn things that you will be hard-pressed to ever find in a book. Now, this woman who runs the Serpent's Key, I don't know what her deal is. I don't know why she can't just come and tell you what I just told you, instead of trying to make this big charade out of it and trying to lure you in with this dime store novel monologue. It's so cheap and disgusting to hear this being done. And guarantee if these people, you watch, if these people go anywhere with these endeavors, E.A. Coetting and this lady and Jeremy Crow, and if they actually carry this on, you watch. They'll go to every single deity of renown of every culture, and they'll do the exact same thing with it. And they'll tell you stuff about that deity that, from the position of a novice, from the position of someone who's not experienced doing invocation or evocation, what have you, cannot verify or dismiss. They'll tell you things that they know you can't verify or dismiss in order to capitalize on that, in order to capitalize on your, sorry to say this, your ignorance. I'm going to do the opposite for you here. I'm going to do just like Lucifer and Azazel and other such entities will do when you call them. Because that's only right? If it was done for me, if my liberation was accelerated with the help of entities like this, it's only right for me to pass it on to other people who are interested. One for one. Like Alex Jones would say, 360 win. Right? The less ignorance in the world, the better. We are creatures of knowledge, of enlightenment, of philosophy. We're creatures of ability. We're not creatures of darkened chakras and venom being injected into bodies and all this horse shit. This utter horse shit that this lady puts forth. Azazel is a being who can greatly accelerate your development of motor skills. The fine motor skills that you take, say, to draw with, or to do stencil cutouts with, or whatever, or to run a router freehand on wood, any of those things, to do jewelry with, he can greatly accelerate your ability to use fine motor coordination. And as anyone who works with their hands can tell you, that's basically a huge prerequisite that helps you bridge the gap, is required for you to bridge the gap between rough work and fine work. Okay, there's a huge difference between rough work and fine work, and that's what it involves, is you being able to use your hands for very fine operations. It's a huge thing. And normally, it'll take someone years to develop. Okay, when I wanted to learn to sketch and draw, you know how long it took me? 1 year. 1 year, and I've progressed by leaps and bounds in my ability to sketch and to draw. And my ability to sketch and draw determines my ability to take an image from inside my head or on my mind's eye and put it into the manifest world. On paper, with a digital tablet, whatever. That's huge. And if you don't understand what I'm saying there, take a moment to consider it. That is huge for an artist or a craftsman to be able to do that. That's not enough? That's not enough for somebody? They need venom and screwing up chakra systems and, this can be so dangerous if you're the wrong kind of person. So go to my members only. That's what she does. Go to my members only thing, and I've got other content in there that you can only have if you're a member. Who does that sound like to you? Does that ring a bell? That kind of monologue? Sound like Yahweh? Sounds like Yahweh to me. Okay, so this probably won't be the only time I do this. Probably do it several other times just to make sure the point gets hammered home. But there's a way to deal with these entities, and there's a way to not deal with these entities. And it's very simple. Like any professional in the world, like any person who has any sense of dignity at all, you approach them knowing what the hell you want, and you're honest about it. And if you don't do that, bad things are going to happen. You can't hide hidden agendas from them. It doesn't work like that. They will find out eventually, if they haven't found out right from the beginning, and they'll turn that back around on you just to show how stupid you are. So you have a clear idea in your mind of what you want. And if that idea is wholesome, Like, me wanting to learn to develop fine motor skills so that I can draw and run a router freehand on wood. Hey, that's not hurt nobody. They'll just carry you right on through that. They won't even ask for you to give them anything. They'll carry you right on through it because that's the greatest. That's one of the greatest accomplishments that they, in terms of who they are, can do. And by that I mean these high-level ancient deities, these ancient entities. It's one of the greatest things for them is not only to be able to see through your eyes while they're making this telepathic connection with you, but to be able to accelerate your development on the path. They don't need blood sacrifices. They don't need people to have mass orgies and give each other diseases. They don't need you to go get some animal and torture it or whatever it is these weirdo people do behind closed doors. I'm sure they do a lot of weird crap that's totally unnecessary. They don't care if you have a bunch of old bones around or medieval weapons. They don't care about that stuff. It's a lot simpler than you might think it is, dealing with them. You have a wholesome idea for what you want. You bring it to them in a formal setting, a ritual. It could be designed any number of ways. Basically, customize the ritual. It doesn't matter. As long as when they see the ritual being performed, they can say with certainty that this is what you are doing. That way, no accidents occur. Because, it is serious. It is serious in that you're forming a telepathic link that's permanent. And if you're not ready in the sense that you do have hidden agendas or that you don't really know what you want, then the fail-safe is that you never perform the ritual. And what will happen is that people will ignore the fail-safe anyway. They'll ignore their instinct. They'll ignore their intuition, which is back-channeling huge amounts of fear and terror to them to try to get them to turn back. They'll ignore that, and they'll go forward, and they'll listen to the old grimoires, and they'll go get blood, or they'll get animal pieces, or this crystal, or that metal, or whatever, and they'll do it under this astrological sign, just to put all this extra stuff into it, to try to get a result pushed through. And all that energy that they put into it only turns around and backfires on them. And I can guarantee that you will never find me a person that has done what I just described and came out the other side wholesome. Came out in one piece. For instance, E.A. Coetting. He seemed to be fine as long as he was working with the goetic spirits. And if he had just done that, probably laid off the drugs, and maybe gone into the Norse mythology a little bit, and continued to work with his hands and try to build a wholesome empire, working with his hands, doing regular human stuff, right? He would have been fine. But that's not what he did. From the goetic spirits, Azazel and Lucifer and those guys, he was not satisfied, so he started going into other spirits from the Middle East, and then it looks like he just got tired of working with Middle Eastern spirits entirely because he wasn't satisfied with the level of so-called power he was getting from them. And then he went to the Loa. He went and he got himself into Haitian Voodoo, which involves a entirely different set of spirits called the Loa, which are, African through and through. They are distinctly African and are completely unlike the other pantheons. The Loa is completely unlike any other pantheon of deities that you'll come to work with. I personally would not advise you work with the Loa. Even if you are of African descent, I would not work with the Loa. So what happens to E.A. Coetting? I saw a video where he was kind of running around, setting up this ritual where he was going to clean the Loa out of his ritual space. And he seemed to be in a big hurry about this, and it seemed to have been a decision that he made hastily, that he didn't think about too much. And then 2 weeks, a month maybe later, I'm not clear on it, but a short time after he did this Loa cleanup ritual, his face swole up. Now, that was a direct result of either the drugs he was doing, which I doubt that it was solely because of drugs he was doing, although I know the guy does his share of drugs, which also, I'm going to advise you stay away from drugs as much as you possibly can. I doubt that it was drugs that did that to him. I've never seen anybody whose face puffs up like that, and it's not like, reddened inflammation or anything like that. His whole face puffed up, and it stayed like that. And he became ugly. I mean, he was ugly after that. He looked like shit, and people were telling him in his comments that he looked like shit. And his face still hasn't really returned to the way it looked before he started messing with the Loa. Alright, so he's just one example. If you want to take Jeremy Crow, I don't believe that guy has ever actually made a good contact with the entities he's claiming to have made contact with. He seems like just another average guy who is culturally subverted. The cultural mind control program has been successful on him, and he's pretty much obsessed with sex and power. This lady that runs the Serpent's Key, she obviously uses sex knowing its attractive power to pull people in. But I'm going to tell you right now, okay? Invoking Azazel and using Azazel is not going to increase your sexual power. Okay, let's back up a minute. Let's straighten this term out. There is no sexual power. Sex energy is a byproduct of vital energy that runs through your body, through you, as a spiritual being at all times. It is a creative force. It's the force that you make babies with, and it's also the force that you do all of your human expressions with. It's not a power that you use over other people unless you're using it as allurement, the same as you would use money or drugs or wealth or any other attractive thing to pull people in, to con them, and to keep them subdued. Which is basically the whole objective behind cultural subversion. The cultural subversions that you see going on in the USA and in European countries right now. They basically do that entire thing right there. They use the money, and they use the wealth, and they use the sex as little danglies on the end of a fish line to get you lured in. And they keep you chasing that lure, and they never quite give it to you. They create the conditions for you to never be satisfied in any of your pursuits. Anytime you turn on the television, or you listen to the radio, or you take in any of these other forms of mass media, including the video games, you consent to a slave-master relationship. A relationship that takes place in the domain of intellectualism and spirituality. These people are operating in the intellectual and spiritual dimensions, realms, what have you. And the entire relationship starts with you turning that on, opening that up, or whatever, and taking what information they have to offer, because that's all they're offering you at that point is information. And like you do with anything else that you don't want to hear, you shut it out. You tune it out. You tell them to shut up. You turn something off. But that's not what you do. You accept it as a legitimate information source, and you accept what it has to say. You can sit there and tell me that while you're watching it or reading it, you don't accept what it has to say. But I know for a fact that the best that you can do is suspended belief. Now, in most cases, suspended belief is a beneficial part of the learning process. But in this case, it's not. Here's the problem. These information sources come from people who are known to lie 80 to 100% of the time. I don't know where I heard that statistic from, but whatever. It's commonly recognized as true. 80 to 100% of the time, the newspaper, the television are lying to you. So why even bother to try to sort it out? It's not like a history book that's 80 to 90% true and 10% aberration. When you take a history book, it's commonly accepted as being a legitimate source if the history book corroborates on the events that occurred, whether or not it places them in a biased context. And so that is an example of a slave-master relationship, and it's an example that I can give you readily that takes place in such a way that you can see it going on in the world. Things that occur between people and entities don't occur to the average person who doesn't have this kind of spiritual vision. They don't occur and present themselves as the contract that they are. Okay, so contract. When you first initiate contact with these entities, you start writing out the contract from that point on. It's not something that you, or it shouldn't be something that you write down on a piece of paper and bring to the entity. The natural way is through a telepathic exchange that's not too fast and not too slow, and results in there being no unclear boundaries in the contract. The contract, in terms of what's going on with you and the entity, are a strict set of interaction rules. So, because you are writing the contract from the first initial contact you have with them, what happens if you bring that desire for a slave-master relationship to those entities? Because you are just too simple of a person to understand that that's not the best way to approach them. In fact, that's not a good way to approach them at all. What happens is that they take your innermost request, and this is key. Understand that this is what happens with these types of entities. They take your innermost request and they make it real. Pretty simple. In their own unique way, they make it real. So you bring them hidden agendas, you bring them desire for power that you don't deserve, you bring them ideas of a slave-master relationship, and they only help you manifest those things in your life. And in that way, they show you how stupid you were. What is happening right now, in fact, what you're hearing occur in this broadcast, is that these people are being made examples of. E.A. Coetting, Jeremy Crow, and this lady from the Serpent's Key are being made examples of. I'm the one pointing out the example that's being made of them. To any person who has any inkling of wisdom at all, who knows how to prioritize things in terms of importance in the world, will look at E.A. Coetting and Jeremy Crow and this other lady and think that they're ridiculous and they're right. And all this does is to soil up, in the eyes of the average person, what's actually going on in our interchanges with these entities. We have to kind of closet this stuff because people don't understand it, and they get this image of it that's been concocted and presented for a long time that we can't get out from under. And it's a huge problem, because it is natural that if someone looks at an idea you have and sees that you're a wacko, that they should want to distance themselves from you. That's a natural mechanism that occurs in people to prevent mental illness from spreading. There are only very few people who can be around a person who's mentally ill and not somehow be influenced by it and not start to mimic that person. It takes a whole different kind of mind and set of social parameters to actually not be influenced by mental illness when it's around you. Most people don't have the ability. So if mentally ill people hang around mentally ill people, they kind of pass it around like germs. It's very weird, and it says a lot about the nature of telepathy. So if someone has been taught their whole life that someone like me deals in animal blood and all this grotesque stuff and performs very obviously unwholesome rituals, and that they hold, dangerous ideas in their head toward their fellow man, then it's right for them, until they've been shown different in an example, to profile me like that. That's the exact thing that I'm fighting against right now. That's why I'm doing this right now. This isn't arising out of an animosity I have for these people themselves, but I can't tolerate what they do. So they're being made an example of. You're getting the example right now. I'm explaining to you how they're an example. Never, ever will they turn you on to the highest of philosophies. Ever. They will never teach you about how science actually bridges into this stuff, and what you might benefit from studying right now, such as radio communications. In radio communications, you can discover a lot of different principles that also apply to metaphysical subjects. And radio communications isn't the only one. In fact, in every single one down to masonry, hey, how about that? Masonry, I mean brick and mortar masonry, I mean right down to making cement, right? Right down to mixing up mortar, you can find these spiritual principles inlaid. But they're not going to turn you on to that. They're too busy trying to stay relevant and make money. They want to make this their career, doing this. Giving you this bullshit, when they could just as easily go write novels, right? Write nonfiction. I mean, write books, guys. You do a lot more for people if you just wrote books and left the spiritual stuff to people who know what they're talking about. Because you look like fools. You three people that I keep naming on here, you look like fools right now. You're being made an example of. The very contract that you started your relationship with these entities with is being shown to people with eyes to see it. And everybody who ever wrote a grimoire on this stuff has been made a fool of. You borrow elements of a culture that you claim to hate. You borrow their writing. You borrow their terms. You even pray to their deities. Yeah, if you follow those old grimoires, you're being told to pray to Adonai and Yahweh, aren't you? Do you do it? Oh, so you don't do it. Okay, so tell me this. What are you doing with someone else's magical designs, only following part of them? Okay, guys, which is it? Tell me, which one is it? Are you doing the rituals in the old grimoires the way you're supposed to? Or are you not? Why do you have the grimoires then? So, the grimoire people, the people who write the grimoires on Demonolatry, and put this stuff into writing, they all get made fools of. And it doesn't take long. And that's exactly what will happen when you go to one of these ancient intelligences. When you call up any god or goddess of renown, expect this same thing to happen. Expect them to take what's in your heart, not what's coming out of your mouth, and give it to you. If you come to them with ideas about gross and ugly abominations of the spiritual realm, about terror and horror and evil, and you call them evil, and then you come up with all this slave master bondage crap and throw that in there, what do you think they're going to give you back? And so what happens? You get uglier. You stay weak, or you get weaker. You become a slave to yourself. You become a slave to whatever your influences are. You become a slave. That's what they help you turn into, because that's what you had in your heart when you come. Ask yourself, what's your take on satisfaction? Are you in it to fill desires? Or are you in it to breed satisfaction? Do you want satisfaction to be a self-sustaining chain reaction? Or do you want a cycle of empty, full, empty, full? You can have it either way. If you go to them and you're asking for money, you're asking them to fill a hole that you perceive as there. Ultimately, what you'll get is further locked into a cycle of empty, full when it comes to money. It won't be a perpetual self-sustaining thing. If you come to them wanting to breed satisfaction, wanting to make satisfaction a self-sustaining chain reaction, that's what you'll get. And maybe you will go on and find better ways to make money, to make more money. Or maybe you will figure out better ways to use the money. But ultimately it won't matter, because you're still satisfied, right? It's literally your command being put forth, whatever that command is, on whatever high level. So you want to think about these things. Don't be like these people. And don't be like all these other idiots that we've all seen. Sacrificing animals and this and that. They get made examples of in the long run. And anybody with any rational mind at all looks at that stuff and goes the other way. You know, when they look at you and they see that you're all weak and you got no muscle and you're just basically a big soy boy, a stereotypical bug man, right? You look like you just crawled up out of a cave, literally your mother's basement, and people can read it all over you. Why in the hell would they try to get near you, let alone follow your example? You see what I mean? So any of you people out here with the Luciferian philosophy who claim this is about liberation, I mean, really? Just your liberation? Is that as far as this goes here? You claim disgust at the story of Adam and Eve and how the liberation that they could have had was made into a punishment for them by the entity that claimed to create them. And you say that that's detestable, but then you don't want to liberate them. And you start making arguments about relativity and completely ignore the fact that this is a cosmic war for the survival of your kind. And that when this entity gets a hold of these people, he turns them into his soldiers in that war. That didn't occur to you? Oh, you know about the war, but you don't think that it takes place anywhere but on the earth, in the souls that are in people's bodies? You don't think that the war occurs out there too, or wherever else that you go? Where are you going? These are your people, man. And you've let this asshole come in here and tell them lies and turn them into sheep? And that's just okay? And that's their free will? No, that's the version of free will. Get with it, man. Bunch of bullshit. And you're willing to ignore the problem if you just get this amount of sex, money, whatever, food. If you get your creature comforts, you're willing to go ahead and ignore that. Yeah. That doesn't sound right to me, and I can guarantee that these beings that you're going to go contact, that EA Coetting claims to have contacted, they see it the same way. Because what are you without your people? Without humankind? What are you? You're alone? What is it? You don't get to determine whether there will be others like you. You only get to determine whether you go out alone on this path of liberation or whether you stay with these people and do your best to unconvert them. I don't know. Undo the psychological programming. I can't see the position that we're not supposed to undo the psychological programming as being legitimate. That this programming, which is a deliberate subversion of free will, well, that's their free will to be ignorant. No, it's not. No, it's not. And Miss Serpent's Key over there, I listen to your videos and it's full of nothing but shit from front to back. There's not one good idea in there, and all you're doing is selling something. You're buying people's attention or something. I don't know what it is, but you're not helping them. And if you're not helping them, well, that's fine, but say so. Don't make me call you out. Don't make other people call you out. Don't try to trash this thing we're doing, rebuilding European culture. Just get the hell out of the way. Go get a day job. And I'm real tired of hearing you people parroting SJW narratives. Like nobody notices that. Especially you, Eric Coetting, EA Coetting. Quit trashing pagan culture, Eric. Or Matthew, or whatever your name is. This is the honor of our ancestors that we're trying to bring here into this world. And you're trashing it. This ain't some rainbow flag for you to wipe your ass with and throw at us. This isn't a tool for you to use and for you to teach other people to use to get sex, money, occulted knowledge, or whatever you're trying to get. That doesn't benefit us as a species. Our pagan cultures are what root our species to this earth. They are not a tool for your satisfaction. You people are a bottomless pit of unfulfilled desire. You can't make yourself satisfied without shitting all over our culture. You know what's satisfying to me? Coming up with a goal that I don't think I can accomplish, and then changing my mind and saying that I'm going to accomplish it, and then accomplishing it. That's satisfying to me. And that's something that I can keep doing for the rest of my life, with or without wealth, with or without sex, or anybody to follow me around and give me attention. And I can keep doing that, and I can keep being satisfied doing that. The only thing that needs to keep getting more and more extreme is the challenges that I find in terms of their perceived impossibility. Having sex is not a challenge. Okay? Seeing a girl that you don't think you could ever get in bed with, and then setting out to change her mind about that, that's not a challenge and an accomplishment. Okay, that girl makes a decision as to whether she's going to get in bed with you. And that's the end of the fucking story. If you go through the trouble of convincing her, I can guarantee you right now, it's not going to be good for you. That relationship is going to not work. You're going to wind up wasting a great deal of time, energy, and money. And in the end, the only thing you're going to have to show for it is lessons about what not to do with other humans. Okay? So, we nailed that coffin shut, didn't we? Do not listen to people like the Serpent's Key when they tell you that sex is a power, and when they try to entice you with ear candy like dark sexual energy. It's a bunch of fucking bullshit. Alright? It's the Jewification of something that's wholesome and honest and has the potential to greatly help people. And all of these people that are getting into demonolatry now and producing multimedia about it, they're doing the same damn thing. They're Jewing up what could be a great thing. And all these old grimoires that tell you to get rods and threaten the demons and all this, you know, really? And if you read an old grimoire and you find that to be a good idea, you're going to get exactly what you deserve. And what that so-called demon is going to do is he's going to let you think that you're in power, that you're in charge over him or over her. And you're probably going to find out, hopefully before the end of your life, that you were being played with like a toy. What do you think all that possession stuff is about? Why do you think it becomes about possession, where the entity is possessing someone and using them for their purposes? Because that's exactly what the fuck you try to do in the beginning. And the Yahweh worshippers are no different. They go over there and they tell you that Yahweh has a plan and that Yahweh knows what he's doing, but then they go and they pray to Yahweh to try to change the fucking plan. So these demonolators, they do the same thing when they call up demons. They try to take an entity that you should have great reverence and respect for, that you should be afraid of when you first encounter them, and they think that they can steer this spirit around to do what they want and change its agenda. Are you fucking retarded? Jesus Christ. I mean, yeah, that's what it is. A lot of these people are fucking retarded. They're really that stupid. You know, I saw a video on one of these alt-right shitposting pages not too long ago where this black lady gets a stun gun for Christmas and her friends tell her it's a vibrator. And you know what she does? She lays down in the bed all sexy like and she goes, "Ooh, I'm going to try this out. I'm going to try this out." She sticks the stun gun. And bear in mind, she's been clicking it and watching it zap in her hand and saying, "I don't know how to use this, but I'm going to give it a try." And she lays down on the bed and she sticks it on her own ass cheek. And of course she yelps and she hollers. She didn't understand that zapping and popping and electricity was going to hurt her. Yeah, there are some people that are that retarded. And these are the kind of people that will call up a demon and think that they can wave a magic wand at it and make it do what they want it to do. How about this? How about you approach it with respect and ask it for something honest. Something that's just beyond what you consider to be possible. Something that you're willing to work for the entire way, if you only had a good teacher to show you how to get it. That's what you're asking for. Don't be a dumb fuck. Because that's where these cases about possession and about demonic hauntings come from. That's exactly where they come from. I would advise you right now to unsub from E.A. Coetting, from Jeremy Crow, from The Serpent's Key. Psychosorcerer is okay, as far as I can tell. He's not a nut. He's not trying to Jew this whole thing up. He makes some mistakes some places, but he's got a lot of good information, and he's definitely not on a big power trip with all of it. But those 3 channels, go ahead and unsub from them. And here's what I'll advise you do. Determine that you're going to make contact with whatever entity it is you're wondering about. If you got one in the back of your mind and it's been riding around back there, that's the one you need to call up. That's just the way this works. If it's on your mind and it won't leave, call it up and see what that's all about. Because that little thing, that little hunch, that little obsession back there, that leads to great things. It does. There's a reason why it's there. So go ahead and determine that you're going to do it. And you will start coming up with what you need to do for the ritual. From that point, it will automatically occur. You'll unfold the plan in your mind. What items you're going to need, what figures you're going to draw, so on and so forth. You can go get the sigils. The sigils, somehow or another, they don't taint the sigils. The sigils work to call the entities up. All the information that they put in the grimoires is horseshit, but the sigils do work and are very effective in calling the entity and getting the right entity. And so you'll be able to come up with what needs to be done for this ritual without listening to any of these idiots and without going into these old grimoires that are written by Jews and Judeo-Christians, and they're just not good. Don't mess with them. Don't mess with the old grimoires. They're shit. And so you'll sit down and you'll do this ritual, and from the point you do that first ritual of invocation of that deity, whatever it is, whether it's Persephone, whether it's Hercules, whether it's Azazel, okay, that begins a permanent relationship between you and that entity. And the extent to which you want to take that relationship to the point where it's in your body all the time, like you could call it a passive possession, because there's no sign that it's steering you around or anything like that. But it's definitely, it can taste your experience. The best way I can put it. And that's a big thing for them. They love that part of the deal. Is being able to taste your experience and to experience what you do through your senses. And the relationship can vary in degrees from that's going on sometimes to that's going on all the time. It can vary in degrees from, hey, I'm going to call it up and ask it for help with this specific task, project, undertaking, what have you, and then only have it around for that period of time, or it can be it's around all the time. Because your thought stream has a threshold to it. So, like, let's say if you've done this with 8 or 9 different entities, obviously you can't have all their information channeling through you at all times, plus your own. That doesn't work that way. And that's why I say there's this relationship is as partial or as whole as you want it to be. And that's basically all there is to it. And the rest of what you're going to get to learn about them is very, very private. And you're not going to feel the need to put down any of those private details on paper. You will feel the need to tell other people what I just told you. Go contact the entity yourself and you'll get to know more about them as is appropriate. There are very interesting, intriguing things that you can learn about the entities, but like I said, you'll never find it on paper. You'll never find anybody putting their experience in those terms on paper, and I think that's on purpose. I think that it's a mistake to try to allure people to these things. So anyway, I guess that's going to be about all I got for this rant. You have a good one. Be careful who you're getting your information from.